Warning. Warning. Warning.
Okay, let's run.
Hey, I'm Largo. This is The Lounge, and welcome, one and all. We got a fun show for you tonight, and to keep everything within the rails, because, Eduardo's acting up tonight. I brought Will in. To be
Hey, how's it going, everyone?
How was your day / week / whatever?
Exhausting, but I'm happy to be here in the lounge and kicking back and relaxing. So,
Cool.
Looking forward to this.
Me too. We've been wanting to talk comics for a little while. We're both, fans of the comics from way back in the day, but it's not just, for us and Eduardo to hang out and talk comics. We needed to get some semi-experts on the field to come in and reminisce about some memories of the good old days, going and picking stuff up off the rack and seeing what's new. And without further ado, let me introduce our guests for the evening.
Good evening.
Double feature tonight, kids. Look at this. Full house.
Hey, look at this.
Gojitron's an old favorite of the lounge. Jeff, this
Good
is
to
your
be
first
here.
time here. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love this. This is going to be freaking fun.
Yeah, man. We all are big fans of your work with Chasing 80s and
Thank you.
Seeing some of the cool stuff you collect, and we're interested to hear what you got to say on comic books, because I know you got a few.
A few, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but it's a few.
Fair enough. Well, tonight we're not looking for experts so much as we're just looking for guys that want to reminisce about yesteryear and what they remember and love about comics as kids. Goji, we're going to start with you, because I got the slideshow set up first. So again, welcome, gentlemen. This is our comic book double feature with Gojitron and Jeff Barker. And for most of you kids out there that are millennials or what have you, you probably have seen long boxes, short boxes. You've seen comics on the rack or in different bookstores and whatnot. But for us old school guys, us Gen Xers, this is what we went to. The spinner rack.
Absolutely.
Whether it was at your 7-Eleven, your grocery store, these were everywhere. And it was like a beacon to a little kid. It was either you run to the Slurpee machine or you run to the comic spinner rack and see what is new and exciting. So
for me, it was a
that's what
little.
we're talking about.
There was a little hole-in-the-wall convenience store called GI Joe's, and it was between the elementary school and my house. So I'd stop there after school, and the place was about as wide as a kitchen pantry. But you'd go in, and on one side was the spinner rack, and on the other side was the magazine stand where the Treasury editions would be sold. So I was in there a few times a week, kind of flipping through. And I went to my old neighborhood a few years ago, and it's actually still there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's still called GI Joe's. Obviously, very different, but
Yeah, sure.
it still stands.
It's very cool to be able to see those kind of places, especially little mom and pop places that are able to survive against the big box stores.
Yep.
So that's one, win one for the little guys there. We got a whole bunch of folks in the comments. Let's pop through and say hello. Mr. Scuba Pete's here. Howdy, sir.
Yay.
Scuba!
Pete.
Cheers, everybody.
Ian Sweeney. Good to see you, sir. Zazel from Sergeant Slaughter.
Hey.
Ed from Axion Figs, the super wrench for the Helidopers. And Mr. Keith Knight. Good to see you, sir.
Hey, Keith.
Good morning where you are. Yes, he's on the other side of the pond, as we say.
Good day, Keith.
And Rolando. Good to see you, sir.
Cheers.
James from Ratface 44 Reviews.
Nice.
Good to see you, sir. And let's see, are we about caught up?
I see Thanos Copter, Stephen Sheets.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, Steven Sheets, one of our newer subscribers. Good to see you. Tremendous singing voice, by the way.
Usual mic in there.
Usual Mike.
Yeah. Awesome.
Weird Fantastic Toy Adventures. Hey, Bill.
You guys are going faster than I can keep up.
Yeah.
I'm old. I'm vintage. There's Thanos Copter. Hey, good to see you. Usual Mike, good to see you. Love your Star Wars stuff. Love seeing some of the reviews that he does and just talking all the good stuff. Bill from Weird Fantastic Toy Adventures, good to see you, sir.
Hey, Bill.
Man, we got a lot of cool people here. And Reynolds Reviews, good to see you.
Welcome to the lounge.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Oh, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention Jesse the Epic Badger. Good to see you.
Jesse.
He's on his way home. He'll hop on soon. We got a whole bunch of stuff to go through tonight, so let's just jump into it. So, spinner rack memories. When we were kids, everybody thought about throwing on a cape and being a superhero, and what inspired us were comics. Goji, these are some of your spinner rack memories, so I'll let you go first, sir, and then we'll be the peanut gallery. So, starting you off.
Incredible Hulk Annual number 5. And this was my introduction to the Atlas era monsters. I think this is one of the first times they entered the Marvel Universe, including the original version of Groot. So for all you kids out there, Groot was not originally a dancing twig. He was a giant tree monster from outer space that wanted to conquer the Earth.
That's right.
And this was a really action-packed issue. I think Sal Buscema drew this one. He was one of the regulars on Incredible Hulk. Just a fight scene from start to finish, and it was an annual, so it was an oversized issue. So just Hulk fighting 6 different monsters.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you'll see later. Hulk fighting people is one of my favorite things. So I was not aware of this issue, but now I really want to find it and I want to read it for myself. So.
I kind of do too. I'm the same way. I kind of do too.
Two best words in comics: Hulk smash.
Yeah.
And this one has some great Kirby art on the cover. Gotta love that. And yeah, like Goji said, we've got several of the Atlas era monsters that are snuck into the Marvel Universe through some chicanery by I can't say it.
Zemnu, the Living Titan. In his first appearance in the late 50s, he was actually called the Hulk. So he always had a grudge against the Incredible Hulk because he took his name.
I did not know that. So yeah, when Marvel Legends did the figure, I wasn't familiar with him, and then I went back and looked at some old comics. Like, oh yeah, he's an old school baddie. Cool.
Great pick, and no reason you became a fan after reading this issue, I'm sure.
Right. Jeff, are you a Hulk fan?
You know, I never was until later on. I was a big Avengers fan, so I kind of got into Hulk that way. But and of course, loved the TV show when I was a kid. But I never bought Hulk comics when I was buying a lot of comics when I was younger. But I always liked the character. It just never was one of my ones I went to. But nowadays, all the stuff they're doing with the Gray Hulk, back to Gray Hulk because originally Gray Hulk, and then Red Hulk, and it's some cool stuff.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have a Rainbow Hulk soon.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno show that got me into Hulk comics. Because watching the show as a kid, I wanted to know more about the character, and the Hulk from the comics was very different, but still cool. So,
Red Hulk.
Nice.
Oh yeah.
Very cool Red Hulk.
And Pericles, you haven't missed much. We just started a little bit ago. Good to see you. So moving right along.
Justice League of America, yes, sir. Super Friends was one of my gateway drugs into comics. So when I saw Justice League of America, this was the first issue I picked up. A little different than the cartoon, a little more serious, but still very enjoyable. Nice to see all the superheroes team up. I always love the big groups like Avengers and Justice League and Defenders and all those guys when they teamed up.
Now, was this the satellite years?
Yep, this was the so-called satellite era, and usually in these stories, to make it easier to write, they would split the Justice League up into teams, and they'd have, Chapter 1, Superman and the Flash, Chapter 2, Aquaman and the Atom, or whoever, and then at the end of the story, they'd all team up to fight the final boss. So it was easy to follow, even with all the characters in it.
Yeah, this one had kind of a wild and wacky story they were going through, with the idea of someone had caused insanity through the paper they used to manufacture money. So some egghead scientist said, well, I'll create these sonic cards that'll replace money. It's like, it's a little foreshadowing of things to come. I don't know. But of course, the cards cause all kinds of chaos, and Justice League has to save the day, which they eventually do.
Yeah, the plots back then were a little bit wacky and convoluted.
I gotta tell you, I'm intrigued. I want to read this now because it's just so insane that I'm like, intelligent bees. I mean, it's got everything. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to read it.
Queen Bee's a classic JLA foe, and she definitely pops up in this one. So
I never read DC much when I was a kid. I kind of want to now more and more.
Yeah, like Goji, it was the Super Friends that got me into it, and then
DC had a very, very much looser continuity than Marvel in the Bronze Age. So it's easy to pick up old DC issues and not have to worry about continuity all that much.
That's cool.
Right. This is just, man, that cover art alone, it hits on every cylinder. You've got the United States of America having its bicentennial. You've got Cap hitting issue number 200. You've got Kirby on the cover art. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yep. So we know Kirby, established much of the Marvel Universe in the 60s, left in the early 70s to go over to DC and create the New Gods and all those. Then in the mid-70s, he went back to Marvel. And he went back to one of his original characters, Captain America. And at that time, the Falcon was a co-headliner on the comic. And there was some really crazy stuff in this Kirby run. And this is the comic that made me a lifelong Kirby fan, because he did some, it's really weird, the stuff he did in this comic, but it's weird in a good way. Like, this is the run where he created Arnim Zola, who was the android body with the big TV face in his chest. A lot of crazy stuff, but it was cool.
So, did you read the whole Mad Bomb story arc? I mean, that went through like
I have this whole Kirby run in trade paperback. I have the whole run collected, so yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty trippy and great storyline. Love the artwork. This is a good one. Plus, it reminded me the letters page. That was something we had as kids back before the emails and social media. If you wanted to write a letter to your favorite comic book publisher, you could. And if they really liked your letter, they would publish it in the book. In the back.
Did you guys ever do that?
Yes.
I never did. I read them, but I never wrote.
I can't remember if I ever did either. I don't think I did.
I had a letter published in an issue of Micronauts.
Nice.
Did you?
Awesome.
Nice. Excellent. I always wanted to win a Marvel No Prize, and I thought one time me and my brother, we thought we
cool.
got one, and we wrote it, and we had the thing, and months later I'm looking through to see if we won. Someone else found the same mistake, but it wasn't until like years later we found like the letter on top of the refrigerator. We just never mailed it. Somehow it just got shuffled out, and I was like, oh. But yeah.
And yes, Ian, Eduardo is definitely a Cap and Falcon fan. Probably more Falcon.
Yeah,
I would say, yeah.
Or maybe not.
I don't know. But let's wrap with Cap. What a great name for the letter page. And then shifting over to the other distinguished competition.
Yep. 1970s Batman. The only thing I knew of Batman before reading the comics was Adam West and the Super Friends. So at this point in Batman's career in the 70s, he was an actual detective in Detective Comics. He was solving regular murders, no supervillains. So if someone got killed, he had to gather the evidence and find the suspects and all that. And this is how I learned that there could be different incarnations of different characters going on simultaneously. Because this
so
was
he's
not
not
Adam
getting
West.
ready to do the Batusi in that
He is
scene right there.
No.
So what was the regular Batman comic book like at this time compared to the Detective? Was Detective more detecting as a detective?
Yes, there were supervillains in the Batman title. In the regular Batman title, that's where you'd see the Penguin and the Joker and those guys. And Detective Comics was more detective stories. And they also had the backup stories, as you can see there with Man-Bat. Some of the issues, they had Hawkman and different characters kind of cycling through the backups.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, was the Batman Family comic going about this time also?
Yep.
And so that was more Robin, Batgirl.
Yeah, that was Robin, Batgirl, and they also used that. That was an oversized comic. They also put some Silver Age reprints in there, which was another great thing you don't see in modern comics. They had all the reprint titles back then where you could catch up on continuity for the cost of 25 cents or whatever.
Yeah, plus all the editor's notes. I'd always love to look for the little asterisks where the editor would say, if you like this, then go back to this issue to find out more about this story. They don't seem to do that much anymore either.
Yep.
So is there a place to go to read all these old comics, like comicsology or anything like that?
Comicsology has a lot of them.
Yeah. I would say I can't think of anything else.
You can find a lot of them on the high seas if you're into that. But if you get a virus on your computer, it's not my fault. I didn't.
Allegedly.
Yeah, prank call.
I was gonna say these Detective Comics. When I was like 6 or 7, I was like, there are so many words, But later on, I went back and read all of these, and these were the ones that I loved the stories. I loved actually how wordy they were, and going through the detective stories. And it was one of the biggest, I guess, missteps in the movies that came out. Was he doesn't do much detecting. He's not a detective, and I always thought that Batman would make a great procedural crime drama TV show where they just had him doing solving crimes or mysteries, but never really got that.
Kind of the street level superhero, like a Daredevil or something on the Marvel side, where it is more just solving crime.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pericles brings up something interesting. I have seen the clip of Lyle Wagner doing the test screening for Bruce Wayne before Adam West picked up the role for the '66 show. You guys seen that?
I haven't seen that.
No.
Never saw that. No.
He would have made a good Bruce Wayne. He ended up in the Wonder Woman show instead, but what could have been?
Yeah.
And our buddy Bjorn says, I think if two people, when I think of Batman, Conroy and Keaton. Interesting. Conroy definitely. Keaton, he's okay, but Conroy definitely did a beautiful job as the voice for both Bruce Wayne and Batman and the inflections he put in there. But that's a rabbit hole for another day. We're talking comics today.
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. That's like the worst key.
World made of cardboard. I'm sorry, you missed everything. We're
just wrapping up, John. Sorry.
See everybody later. See you guys.
No, we're just getting started. Batman is what you get when you combine James Bond and Sherlock Holmes. That is very, very true of the 70s detective era. He was very much both. Gadgets and detective. Very cool.
Yeah, I got to go back and watch some. I read some of those. I got to try to find them.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So where were we? Sorry, Goji, we interrupted you there. So we were on Batman, and then shifting over to Spidey.
Mm-hmm. This issue was thick with continuity, and it didn't turn me off to comics at all. It made me want to learn more and read more. So I think that's something that's missing in modern comics. They always want to make, the very light in continuity, because every comic is somebody's first comic. Well, if you don't make it interesting enough, they're not going to want to buy more. And this comic was very interesting, despite all the wacky shenanigans that were going on inside. I wanted to know more.
And there were quite a few wacky shenanigans, because this was right around the era of the Spider-Mobile, which a few people might remember. It's actually made a resurgence recently in toys, at least.
Yeah.
And this was also the time period when Gwen Stacy had just recently perished.
I know that car.
Yeah, you do. So Spidey was on the lam. The cops were after him because he was wanted in connection with what happened with Norman Osborn and the Stacys. Doc Ock had jilted Aunt May, left her at the altar, and the repercussions of that he's dealing with now. So, man, there was a lot of just all kinds of storylines tied.
And this was classic Spider-Man before he became an Avenger or a member of the Fantastic Four. He was just Peter Parker in his brownstone, trying to make a living, taking photos of himself and sell them to J. Jonah. Very classic. And this run was drawn by Ross Andrew, a very underrated artist. But because of the stories I read when I was a kid, he's my favorite Spider-Man artist.
Yeah.
I probably know his work, but didn't know the name, because I really love this cover.
That cover is beautiful. And I got to say, this many years later, it still has its intended effect, because I'm reading all of this, and those are all rabbit holes you could go down, all those little things. Yeah. And I want to get into it. And that's what comics used to do to me when I was a kid. I'd read the little, see issue this, and I'm like, okay, I need to go find that. And I'd go track it down, and try and complete that story. Sometimes I would, sometimes I wouldn't, but the journey was the adventure, trying to put it all together, or even just using your imagination and wondering what happened, what could have been, why are these characters so mad at each other, what happened in that issue? I have to find out.
Anger.
Reynolds Reviews, talking about Batman again. 89 Batman. Burton knew what he was doing with casting, even though everyone questioned Keaton. That's true. When I first heard the casting, I'm like, Mr. Mom, really?
Yep.
But he pulled it off. He did a great job.
Yeah. And his role in that, I just watched the original movie about a month ago, and it still holds up really well.
Yeah. Favorite line from the movie? Because how's the soup? Best line in the Batman 89 movie.
The gothic timelessness that Burton used. It's not in any one particular era. It's kind of its own era.
It is.
And they carried that over into the cartoon as well, the animated series. So, Mr. Jeff Barker, you're up next, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see, what kind of spinner rack memories we've got going for you.
Okay.
And, we've definitely covered the spandex crowd. We're going to go a little different flavor here. A classic.
Yeah. Throwing this one in there because this is the one that really took off for me for G.I. Joes. There's another one on this list that's G.I. Joe 15, which was my first comic book ever. And then just a few months later, this one came out. And at first when I remember reading through it, and I'm like, so I used to buy my comic books from a Circle K about a block away from my house. And I'd walk through the vacant lot, through the back alley, and show up at the Circle K. And the building's still there. Circle K is long gone. But it was like you said, it was a rack, not a rack, but a magazine area that had them all stacked up. So I would buy comic books and Soldier of Fortune magazines. And
nice.
And back when I was like, those were just stupid to read through. But anyways, so G.I. Joe was the first one I ever got, and it really was the gateway drug for me for the G.I. Joe toys. I was into Star Wars, of course, at the time, but then this one here, it just took off for me. It's like, oh my God, I don't even understand what's going on here because it's silent, because there's no dialogue, and it takes you all of 4 minutes to go through it. But yeah, I gave Pete one of them. Pete, I'm bringing more to Joe Fest.
Cool.
I got one more in here someplace. Anyways, yeah, right there. So it's like, as you can see, every time I see it at a Comic-Con or something like that, I try to pick it up just because it's like a complete emotional attachment to this book, because it is so cool. And it took off where it really cemented the whole thing with Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, and the final panel and the reveal of the Arashikage icon on the wrist, the shared one, and you're like, what is that? And so that storyline to me just was absolutely amazing at the time.
Yeah,
Jeff, awesome pick, man.
Yeah, the toys were cool. My first Joes were the Fuzzy Head Adventure Team. So when these guys came out, I was like, I don't know. But when you read what Larry Hama put together, it's like, wow,
and I love the toys. You can see behind me, but I love the toys because of these comic books versus. I liked the TV show, but it wasn't the same. And I watched it, and I still like it. But it was the comic books. I just completed my full run of comic books about 1.5 years ago, and I absolutely love them.
So I got the second issue of G.I. Joe with no cover.
Oh yeah,
it was from like it was thrown out in the dumpster or something, and I had it, and I read through it a bunch of times, and I had the Vamp was the first thing I got. Yeah. And my brother helped me fill out a form, and we subscribed to the G.I. Joe comic because I wanted to get them. And the first one to come in the mail when we started our subscription was issue 21. I remember getting it out of the mailbox, running it home, reading it, or not reading it, but just looking at the pictures and just being... And we tracked down all the past issues. So back from 21 back, with the exception of 2, and getting one with the cover, it was this mission. We went on and we found them all. And unfortunately...
7 weeks. Till Valicon, otherwise known as Joe Fest.
Yep, we will be there.
We had like a complete run 1 through 50 that we traded for like Spawn comics in the 90s because, and I don't know why we did that, but I wanted the Spawn comics, so I traded some guy like a bunch of issues of G.I. Joe.
Most of the books in my full run are the ones I had when I was a kid, and I still have that very first comic that I ever bought, which was G.I. Joe 15, which is later on the list. But Pete, you better. It's still. I buy things from this time period, whether it's toys or comics or whatever, for the visceral emotional reaction you get when you see them. And yes, there's some value to them, and you can trade them, and some of them will make you some money, some don't, and that's fine. But you buy it for the visceral reaction, and this thing is right up there on the top of the list.
Yeah.
And
Larry Hama,
a really cool guy.
The first name in comics I ever knew.
Me
my
too.
brother was always talking about him. Yeah.
There you go, Tales.
Yep.
And this was a gateway comic to me to X-Men, to Avengers, to Iron Man, to Thor, all the stuff that came out of that, outside of that. So I will always love this book.
Such a great pick.
So Larry signed that comic I just showed. I went to his panel. And he told the story of how he got the job on G.I. Joe. No one else wanted it.
Nobody wanted it, yeah.
He was the last guy at the end of the hallway. So that's how he got the job.
Yeah, he was kind of the last guy on the list.
Yeah.
We're so happy he did.
Yeah. Talk about a happy accident.
Exactly.
Will Made a Cardboard says, I didn't have many comics as a kid. Where I grew up, no one actually sold them. Interesting. Mostly followed the cartoons, watched G.I. Joe, Transformers, as well as Batman, Super Friends, and Spider-Man. Yeah, that was Saturday morning with the pajamas and the cereal. That was a ritual. Mr. Schaefer dropped by. Good to see you, sir.
Oh, hey, Michael.
And Ian Sweeney bringing about the Action Force comics. They were very good. A lot of the UKs were kind of reprints of the G.I. Joe stories, but they kind of had their own spin on it.
I started trying to pick up as many of those as I can. I love the covers on some of them.
Oh yeah, I've got the first 2 issues and a couple of the annuals that they did in the UK. Those are fun.
Yep.
It's great stuff.
Yeah, I think I have 8 or 9 of them.
Epic Badger says, I was given one comic as a kid in the 1990s, Aliens and Colonial Marines. Well, if you got to have one,
that's not bad.
One to start with.
Yeah.
Not the best introduction. Never read a comic again until maybe 2017. Really? I thought those were really good. The Dark Horse Alien stuff is pretty fun.
It's on my list.
there you go. And Scuba, Ian, the Action Force comics are fantastic. They really are. And World Made a Cardboard says, my wife and I are looking forward to going and seeing everybody at Valicon Joe Fest. Yes, first time.
Can't wait to
That'll
see
be
it.
Fun.
Yep.
Yeah. Excellent. And of course, Bjorn will be going as well. And looking forward to shaking hands and getting to know people that we've known from the interwebs for a while. Scuba's going to be hunting autographs this year. That's cool.
Yeah, Pete and I were talking. I'm going to take this and get it signed, and then I'm going to take these 3 and get them signed.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so depends on the line. If the line is god awful, then I don't know if I'll do that.
Well, you've got what, 3 days to try to
That's true. Maybe
everybody up.
Maybe I'll catch him in the hallway and stalk him in the hallway at the hotel.
Either that or hit him up at the bar or something.
Yeah, like, oh, there you go, buy a drink.
That's it. Thanos Copter says, my older cousin's boyfriend gave me a box of comics when I was little, including issue 1 of G.I. Joe, and he still has it. That's awesome.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, that's the great thing about this. We call it, kind of spinner rack memories in jest, but there's all kinds of cool places that comics pop up. Whether it be at the corner store or at a swap meet, flea market. I've picked up comics as a kid from all kinds of different places, or gifts from relatives, because it's always an easy stocking stuffer. And that's where a lot of the memories come from for me. Some comics, I don't know how I got them. I just remember they were in my collection and I really enjoyed them. So, Keith Knight, yep, talking to the gang.
Flea markets used
Transformers
to be great.
#1. Oh yeah,
I love that book. I love Transformers #1. I never was a huge Transformers fan because I was kind of getting out of the stuff around that time, but I love that comic.
And again, where the comics went into more depth with the characters, the cartoons were just very surface, flash and color, and the comics were just better for both Joe and the Transformers.
Yeah, the Joe comics are yes, they have that same tone to some degree, but they're much more serious. People actually die. Halfway through the run, they killed off a ton of Joes, and it's like, oh my God, there's like,
there were consequences.
There was consequences, yeah.
And Ed's telling us I had about an hour-long conversation with Mr. Hama. Cool. Showed me pics on his phone of his friends he based some of his Joes on, like Wild Bill. Very cool. Yeah, some of his friends from his service days, I believe, were inspiration for many of the Joes that came out.
That's really cool.
Very cool.
Yep.
All right. Okay. I'm going to jump out of the chat and get back to this, or we're never going to get finished. We've got a lot of stuff to go through. So, a quintessential G.I. Joe comic.
Yep.
No doubt. The no dialogue issue. I will read this real quick just because it's fun. This was the soliciting hype that they used. And, of course, ironically, they say, no hype, no hard sell. G.I. Joe #21 will be the most unusual war comic ever published. But that's not because it chronicles Snake Eyes on a solo mission, not because of the danger, not because the danger is a toy that could wipe out the world. It's not because Larry Hama both penciled and wrote this once-in-a-lifetime issue either. You must buy it to find out. And, of course, once you get it, there's no dialogue.
Well, and think about that. There's no dialogue on a comic book. Comic books have never really done that. And this was a popular comic book at the time. This was a real gamble for that monthly comic. And whoever can, if Larry Hama convinced them to do this, it's amazing on sales to get this to happen, because, like I said, this was a successful comic at this point, and it's a complete different format change. And you're like, this could have killed them.
Yeah, but brilliant in the visual storytelling. I mean,
I do consider like one of the top comics ever made because of the format switch and the visual storytelling that goes along, that keeps the continuity going during the story. You don't lose your place, and you're like, what's going on? It still makes sense, and it's just genius.
Well, and it's a testament to the fact that he is a true storyteller. He doesn't need the words.
Right.
And to be able to convey emotion without words in a comic book, that's impressive. That's very impressive.
Yeah, and look at the influence it's had on every comic book artist since then. So yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And in that same line, G.I. Joe #15,
Red
Eye to Miami.
Red Eye to Miami. This was a kind of a culmination of a storyline with Quinn and Dr. Venom, and Snake Eyes they were captured. Snake Eyes was captured. They went down to South America. They had a bunker down there that they had to get back from. This was my very first comic book ever. Every time I see this cover, it just kind of gives me chills because it was my first comic book ever, and it was really annoying to me because Quinn and Dr. Venom never had action figures. They kind of do now, but in the original runs in the early '80s and stuff, they never had these figures. They did a little bit later in the '90s, but this storyline of you really got to know Snake Eyes for the first time in this storyline, and what he was kind of trying to do and who he was. And Quinn was this ambiguous character where he was kind of mercenary for hire, but yet he had a moral center that kind of dictated what he did. And of course, Dr. Venom was just pure evil, as hence his name, Dr. Venom. But he also had kind of a bit of a twist at the end. Spoiler alert before he dies. And but it's really well done.
And Dr. Venom was kind of a wink and a nod to the Adventure Team, because a lot of people don't know he was a prototype that was never made in the 12-inch line because they had canceled the line and were getting
I didn't know that.
away from that. He was going to be the main villain for the G.I. Joe Adventure Team when they were, when they had Bullet Man and the Intruders. He was going to be in that line, and for whatever reason, just didn't get made.
Yeah,
and then Larry Hama picked it up and carried that storyline through with his Real American Heroes.
And this story was great because these three had to team up to get out of a horrible situation they were in, to escape the jungle and in South America where they were at, the Sierra Gordo, fake country that they were in.
Right.
And it's it's like they have to team up, but you got to watch for the backstabbing at any inopportune time. And so just a classic kind of trope that they went through, but it's done really well.
Yeah. And the idea of, the heroes and the villains begrudgingly having to become, partners is always a great way to go.
And Hama did that with a lot of stuff. He did that with the Destro episode and stuff too. So that was a lot of things. Oh, this one.
Yeah.
So this
another classic.
This one, at this time I was really getting into G.I. Joe, or after G.I. Joe, my gateway drug into comics was X-Men. And in the 80s and early 90s, X-Men was pretty much all I bought for a lot of times. I bought some Avengers and Iron Man and Thor, but X-Men was the stuff for me. And so there was a local used bookstore that had a bunch of comic books in the back, a bunch of long boxes, and up on one of the pillars was this book hanging there. And it was like $80 at the time. Of course, this came out in '75, and I was looking at this thing in probably 87, 86, something like that. And I convinced my grandmother, because I always took her to the store with me because she'd buy me stuff because I was a spoiled asshole. and I convinced her to buy this for me. She lived like a block away from me, so I spent all my time with her. And she didn't drive, and so I drove her everywhere. And so she would go with me on the weekends to go to the comic book store, which was like a half hour away. Convinced her to buy this for me. I kept this book forever, and then in 2000, I moved to Seattle for work. I live in the Boise, Idaho area, and at the time, I moved to Seattle. I sold this book to my local comic book store, and he's still open. He's a good friend now. Sold it to pay for part of the move. Always regretted it. And then when I moved back to Boise area after 6 years in Seattle, and then a few years after that, I got into a really bad motorcycle accident. Had a little bit of money outside of the accident. I said, I'm going to buy that book again. At that point, it was a $2,000 or $3,000 book, but I had a little bit of the cash, so I said, I'm going to buy that book. I kept it, and I had it for years, and then I just sold it again about a year and a half ago, and did okay on it, did pretty well on it. So I won't go into all that, but I still kind of regret selling it again. But this storyline is absolutely amazing, and this is a key book in Marvel Comics history. And
absolutely.
And it's the old team with Cyclops and Angel and Jane Grey and Iceman and Beast, and kind of getting replaced. It's the second appearance of Wolverine outside of Hulk 181 or 182, depending on who you talk to. But this is like the first appearance of Colossus and Nightcrawler, and it's just an amazing book and a great storyline, and kind of a kickoff from X-Men number 98, where it takes that storyline and kind of finishes out, and they dive back into the regular series. But this is just a one-off giant size number one, and I love this book.
Yeah, it's chock full of stuff, and the way it's presented, I mean, it really is giant size. You've got 4 different major chapters that go through what's going on. A lot of drama. You have some new characters that come in. What was the Japanese character? I can't remember his name.
Sunfire?
Sunfire.
Yep.
What a jerk. Comes in for a minute and says, I'm not a team player.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Well, and it was cool because they, Professor X had to bring this new team together to go rescue the old team,
Right.
and that's how they got together. And this was the kind of the start of the Chris Claremont era of X-Men, which is absolutely the best storytelling run of any comic book, I think, almost up there with Anywhere. And
absolutely, I guess
Pete,
Steve has heard the story of this comic.
Yeah, Pete's
before.
heard me talk about this a lot. So, the Chris Claremont time for X-Men was absolutely amazing, and it informs all the movies that came out ever since then. And this was the start of this was actually X-Men '98, and then this jumping into it was kind of the start of that. So this is a spendy book right now if you ever wanted to try to find one in high grade.
Fortunately, for those of us who don't have the deep pockets, it is in reprint as well.
Yes.
So if you just want to read the story. Plus, there have been so many homages. You can't look at this cover and not see it all through the Marvel. Several different Marvel comics have done this cover splash page or an homage to it in several different ways. And again, like you said, there's backup features here that talk about the origins of Cyclops and his mutant powers, Iceman, Marvel Girl.
Yep.
So it touches on the original team and then introduces you to the new team. Plus you get Banshee, I think Polaris. Pericles is talking about that here.
Yep.
Let's see if I can get that to show up.
Yeah, and
There it
for me, Havoc, Parrish, Banshee, Polaris,
Mm-hmm.
yep. And for me, Giant Size X-Men #1 and Silent Issue G.I. Joe 21, these are the two touchstones for me for comic books, bar none.
Yeah, Claremont did an amazing run and really defined the X-Men for a lot of years.
Yep. If anybody ever gets a chance to, do it. This one, Alien #1, I absolutely loved Alien at the time and Aliens. And this book is this is one of the first Dark Horse comics that came out. Dark Horse was a new publisher at the time, and this cover is completely iconic to me, and I just started really loving the action horror stuff because of this movie. And when I saw this, I was like, wow. And when you open this up, this is a black and white comic. This is not a colored comic, and it's kind of cheaply papered. So yeah, it's a great comic, but it can go bad easy. But it takes off where the second movie left off. Of course, that's
cool.
It doesn't.
Well, the way it should have been with Hicks and Newt surviving.
Yeah. I'm an illustrator and designer by trade, and the artwork in there, because it's all black and white. I was very much a black and white pen and ink artist. Got to have my pen, my technical pens to draw with, and this thing was highly influential to me from the artwork standpoint.
This was like
Goji and I were just talking about this earlier when we were talking about some of the Hammer horror magazines.
Yep.
The black and white actually lends to the story better than a color version would.
It's like watching a movie that has a lot of grain to the film. It just adds a grittiness to it.
That's a good correlation.
Yeah.
Dark Horse, Aliens. This was all my first foray into like the comic book shop, because it wasn't until I went to my first comic book shop. One opened up within walking distance to my home, and I went there, and the shop owner was a real cool guy, and he got me into all this stuff. He was like, watch out, kid, you want to read this stuff. I never heard of Dark Horse. It was always Marvel and DC, and
Yeah, and the comic book shop as a phenomenon was something that came about, when we were younger. I mean, because we went to the grocery store or to the 7-Eleven or wherever to get our stuff, and then all these comic shops started popping up in the mid '80s or so. Yeah. And then you're seeing this whole world of independent comics and things you never saw before.
I had to drive an hour to get to my comic book shop when I was a kid.
I would get my paycheck. I would walk to this guy's comic shop and just basically hand him my paycheck was only like $40.
I was a huge Dark Horse fan because these guys, Dark Horse, owned the Aliens comics. They had Predator and they had Terminator also. And the Predator ones are, so then they started doing the crossover Alien versus Predator. That's where the movies come from, is from these comic books. As far as the base storylines, kind of the outlines for them come from these comic books. Of course, the movies, for want of a better word, kind of sucked. But the storylines in these comic books, in the Aliens ones, the Predators ones, Aliens versus Predator, they're amazing.
Yeah, it was the Dark Horse publishers that were, brainstorming and came up with the idea of merging the two together.
They were. They really were. And then, you saw that Predator #2 movie with Danny Glover, and at the end, when the trophy room's open up, there's an alien head sitting there. You're like, I just lost my shit. And, and it's like, oh my god,
I saw that.
They're gonna start it with those same stories from the comics. They kind of did, but they sucked, and they never really did. But yeah, if anybody ever wants really good stories about predators, aliens, and aliens predators together, go read these.
Yeah, the comics are much better than the films.
Yeah,
Dark Horse had a nice. Dark Horse had a nice run on Godzilla as well.
Yeah,
and of course all the Star Wars comics.
Yep,
so they were a big deal.
They were a big deal.
In the late 80s, early 90s.
Out of Portland, Oregon. I used to go. Whenever I'd go to Portland, I live about 5 hours from Portland. I've got family there. I'd go there and I'd go to their headquarters and walk by and go, wow, that's where all they came from.
Yeah, when the big two started kind of waning, Dark Horse really came into their own, and they were good. They had good writing, they had good art, and then of course there were a lot of other independents that popped up after that.
They did the BPRD stuff, which was Hellboy and that kind of thing too. And they really to me were the very first really important independent comic book company.
Yeah. What was it? Mike Gianola?
Mike Mignola.
Magnolia, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Trippy art style.
Yes.
It took a little while to get used to it first, but once you get into it, it's like
so good.
Storytelling.
Yep.
World Made Cardboard saying he wasn't into comic books much until the 90s when he found a newly opened comic book shop, and then he soaked up as much as he could.
I would suggest anybody that's watching, if you've never been to a local comic book store, go in there and grab a few that strike your fancy and just start reading, and you'll be hooked.
Absolutely, because a comic book is a completely different experience than any other media. You can go back and look at the art, you can go through and read the story, you can pause, you can go back in a way that you can't do on a phone or anything else. Having the physical media there, it's just a better experience.
And the smell in a comic book store.
Yes, I was going to say the feel and the smell of the comic when you open up that. Oh, it's just great. And the ads. It's one thing that I discovered when I got that grab bag and I was going through the comics. The ads bring back so many memories as well. Things you took for granted back then.
And yes, Keith, my nemesis next door, Eduardo, you'll hear him pop through because no matter what kind of sound baffling I use, he just pierces right through it. So we embrace the cock here.
It's his mutant ability. Yes.
So
that is his mutant ability.
The ads. The Adventures of Corgi. The Adventures of Corgi Boy.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love it.
The back.
And
Chop.
What was it? Oh yeah.
Let's see if I can find another one here. This is a Ghost Rider comic from the 70s. Oh yeah.
Half the fun is the ads.
All the ads in the back.
Yep.
Be taller.
Yeah. Are you tired of getting sand kicked in your face at the beach? Then talk to Charles Atlas.
Who else wants a He-Man body?
Yeah, there were at least 4 or 5 build your body ads in those old 70s comics. They must have assumed we were all a bunch of wimps, which we probably were.
Eat the food you love and still lose weight. The 3 big drafting kits given to you. Yeah, it's just I love the smell.
And I'm glad your wife enjoys Eduardo. He does like the spotlight, so fair enough. Ted Darklaw's in the house. He's late, but fashionably late. Listening in the background while he's doing some hella dope work. So Keep up the good work. Good to see you. Ian is remembering Star Wars comic post Return of the Jedi. Boba Fett had survived and was using the codename Sarlacc food.
I don't doubt it.
Good stuff. Oh man. Yeah, a lot of great memories. All this stuff.
Yep.
Really enjoyed the Dark Horse. And then we get back to some classic monster stuff here.
Yes.
So Marvel Monsters.
Koji, you're gonna love this. So this is kind of my newer direction in comics. I am really starting to get into the 70s horror stuff, and Tomb of Dracula I absolutely love. I don't own this comic. This is one of my big hunt items right now. Tomb of Dracula was my favorite when I was a kid. I only read a few of them, but I loved them. Never got into them until just like about a year and a half ago, back into them. So this was a small run. I think there was only like 60 issues in this run, or 60-ish. And so I'm trying to get those. I'm trying to get some of the old Ghost Rider comics, and then I'm trying to get the original run of Silver Surfer. So that was not really horror, but more the cosmic stuff. But the horror stuff has gotten to be really popular, and it's such a subgenre in this, and so 70-ish, and the artwork is so amazing that
look at that cover. Can you guys? That is just
their characterization of Dracula in Marvel was wonderful. And
amazing. He's an anti-hero. He's a kind of an anti-hero sort of guy. You know, he's always being hunted by this cadre of Van Helsing type people, and family of Van Helsing. It was set in modern day, but yet still in Transylvania, but also in London and New York, and it's absolutely amazing. And it's just great storytelling. This is where Blade came from. Blade, and all the characters from the Blade movies are started in Tomb of Dracula, and they're gonna start trying to go back to those. There's supposedly gonna be a Blade movie again coming out. I'm not sure if there will. That first Blade movie, and actually number 3 are spectacular. And so I don't know. I just love the artwork on this, and just the feeling, the kind of this. It's such a difference than just another superhero stuff.
True, and they definitely tie in, especially with some of the later Marvel stuff when they get into the Midnight Suns.
Yeah,
and they start bringing in Lilith and some of the other, demonic types. It still pops up here and there.
Night Stalkers, Midnight Sun.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's weird how it is considered part of continuity and canon within Marvel, because like Dracula has fought Silver Surfer, and X-Men, and you got the Werewolf by Night stuff, and that the Werewolf by Night one-off that just came out on Marvel Plus like months ago, which was amazing. It ties into the whole Swamp Thing stuff. And Man Thing, not Swamp Thing. You're right. Complete ripoff, but still.
Well, they were writing them both about the same time, so they kind of switched back and forth.
Batman and DC at the time had that amazing, iconic cover of Batman looking like full on ears, and at night with the moon in the background and the fog going across. It's an iconic Batman cover. But I just love this stuff, and I'm trying to get a full run of Tomb of Dracula. But of course, number 1 and first appearance of Blade, tough to get.
Yeah, and again, like if it wasn't for Werewolf by Night, we wouldn't have had Moon Knight.
Right? Yeah, Moon Knight, exactly. Moon Knight was in there. Marvel Spotlight was another one where a lot of these kind of supernatural characters were introduced. It was kind of a showcase book, and first Ghost Rider was in Marvel Spotlight. First Moon Knight was in and wasn't it Werewolf by Night was in Marvel Spotlight, I think. Anyways, some of those Marvel one-off or showcase books had some great intros for people. But yeah, I just love this book.
So this was the first Marvel Comics appearance of Dracula. I didn't realize this until I started looking into this. Atlas Comics had actually done a Dracula story in Suspense number 7. So he had been in the comics there before, but his first Marvel foray was Dracula.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I have.
What were the big Marvel monsters, Goji? It was Dracula, of course, Werewolf by Night. There was a zombie story.
Simon Garth the zombie. They did Frankenstein's monster.
Yep.
Incantu the living mummy was in there. Of course, Son of Satan and his sister Satana.
That's what I'm looking for. I know I just bought that the other day. The number 1, Son of Satan, I think is got a lot of potential as a comic book.
Mm-hmm.
And with Marvel, unlike DC, they kept them all in continuity. They were all in the same universe.
Yep.
Until you get into some of the other universe splitting stuff later on that makes your head hurt. But back then, they all coexisted.
Yep.
It was just kind of a subgenre that was very cool.
Pete, I just saw his comment. Teppish.
Pull him up here. Jeff would say you were teppish.
Pete,
boom.
You know what they say in the Master and Commander movie? He who would pun would pick a pocket.
Indeed. Morbius the Living Vampire.
Yeah, love Morbius. Yep. Solo stories.
Did he start as a Spidey villain, or Did he
Yes.
come from another? Yes.
Yeah.
And then he kind of went into the horror areas as well.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
you see
good stuff.
these going on, and I really do think it's a direction that Marvel, the movie cinematic universe stuff, is starting to take more and more. So I think you're going to see these guys more and more in the movies too.
Yeah, and hopefully they do it well.
I hope so.
Fingers crossed.
Moon Knight was okay, and but Werewolf by Night, the one-off, was really well done. So I hope it keeps going.
I haven't seen that one, but everybody said it was a great homage to the old horror
excellent.
classics.
It was excellent.
I don't have Disney Plus, but eventually I hope to see that one because I love that genre.
Yep.
Ian Sweeney says
That's a good one.
not a comic, but he did have a book called The Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew Meet Dracula. I did not know it was such a thing. That's kind of cool. I have to check that out.
It's
I
very
read a lot of
Scooby-
the Hardy Boys.
Very Scooby-Doo.
Nice. Yeah, that's another good crossover. Is,
Yeah.
all the Scooby Gang stuff.
Yep.
DC Comics has been doing a run of Mystery Inc., where a lot of the DC Universe guys will show up and hang out with the Mystery Inc. gang.
Yep.
So,
Oh, and Keith,
Lot
I'm
of-
drinking 16-year-old Balvenie.
oh, he'll love that. There he is. Yep. Indeed. He's bringing some class. The rest of us are doing hydration and caffeine. So.
I got my water here just in case.
And Pericles bringing a fun fact. Both Dracula and Morbius's designs were inspired by Jack Palance.
Yeah, it's funny. You read the Tomb of Dracula books, and he never is outside of a tuxedo like he's getting ready to go to the opera.
Yeah. You would, there wasn't too many leisure suits in Dracula's wardrobe back in the day.
No, he wasn't ever doing any jogging outfits.
Yes, Keith approves. To your health, indeed. Wow. So we've covered some great stuff.
Sorry, I
and,
talked so much.
Oh no, that's the lounge is just a place to hang out and goof, and that's what we're doing. So now we'll see what kind of stuff I pulled up in the cobwebs of my brain from back in the day. Some of these you guys might like. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's the Supermobile. I love this one. Mm-hmm. I was born in '71, so I don't know where I got this comic because I obviously didn't get it when it came out on the newsstand. But someone had picked this up, and it eventually found its way to me. I don't know if it was a family member or my dad picked it up somewhere or what, but the thing that sucked was this is part of an ongoing series. It's like the second part of a 4-part run. So I didn't get the whole story as a kid. I just had this one comic, and this was before comic book stores and all that. So all I knew was Superman has a Supermobile, and it's got giant steel fists, and he's punching a Mazo. How cool is that?
This looks familiar.
I loved it.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, this looks really familiar to me.
So you can thank Corgi for that comic because
Yes.
Corgi was doing the toy at the time,
Maybe that's
and
it.
they convinced DC to put it in the comic. And I forget who the editor was at the time. I think maybe Denny O'Neil. He didn't want to do it, but they kind of forced the issue. So that's why the story exists.
And, it's not a bad story. They worked it in. Superman had just been exposed to a red sun's radiation, and his powers were sapped. And this maniac robot was on the loose. He had to do something, so he goes into the fortress and he whips up the Supermobile, made of supermanium, which is a very DC thing.
Right back. Yeah. I'll be right back.
Okay. So the densest, most hard to find. It's like unobtainium, but it's the DC Universe version. It's whatever they needed to whip up, they would just make stuff up. And
Vibranium, adamantium,
yes,
supermanium.
Exactly. Supermanium. So he knocks this thing together in his fortress using his super intellect, and it reproduces his powers in this wacky jalopy, and hijinks ensue. It's from 480 to 483 is the Amazo story arc. It's worth picking up. These are very inexpensive. They're not high-value comics, but the story is fun. And if you like the Supermobile, which, ironically, McFarlane just put out in his Superpowers line, and it's this version, which was always something that irked me when Kenner did the Supermobile. They didn't go with this design. They changed it. It was like, I want the giant fists. and McFarlane gave it to us. So Toddy Mac, this is one you did good. I like this one. And you're right, the Corgi Toys Supermobile was one I had as a kid. That and the Batmobile were some of my first Corgi toys, and they were awesome. Mm-hmm. And then going over to the other side of the aisle, Amazing Spider-Man. This one, again, it wasn't one I picked up as a little kid, but somehow it ended up in my collection. So somebody in my family was a comic book fan, and I would end up with the leftovers. And the cover art on this was fantastic. Of course, as a kid, I didn't know it was a reprint. I didn't know what a reprint was. I just loved this comic. And it's a good story, great artwork. It's actually a reprint of Spider-Man Magazine number 2. And the original cover art is more, not more detailed. It's a nicer design. This is kind of an homage to it. I wish I'd brought up an image of that one because I like that cover better. But great story, and classic Peter Parker having major problems, juggling 2 chicks because he's got Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane hanging around. Plus, he's dealing with his dear old Aunt May, and he's got Norman Osborn, who has suddenly remembered he's the Goblin, and as the Goblin, he knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. So all kinds of problems are going on right now.
Yeah, I'd love to read this episode, or because he uses hypnotism to trick Green Goblin into forgetting he's.
Let's just say he uses some recreational pharmaceuticals and hypnotism, because during this time, the Goblin bombs were psychedelic.
That's right, I forgot about that.
They were groovy. So, after he gets knocked for a loop by a couple of the pumpkin bombs, he turns them on the Green Goblin and uses him to get old Normie back to semi-normal. As normal as Norman Osborn ever got, because he was always a little crazy.
He was always kind of a friend with him, though.
Yeah. It was an interesting dynamic, because it's like Norman Osborn wasn't a great person, but he wasn't a villain. But the Goblin was just evil. And they were 2 distinct personalities, which was trippy. And JLA, gotta love JLA. Another one. This one I did pick up as a kid. And again, it was the comic art, the cover that sold me. You've got the whole team, you've got a major crisis. There's 2 moons in the sky, what the heck? And good story. And this was back when you could buy an issue and get a whole story in one comic and not have to buy 20 different tie-ins. So a second moon appears in the sky, and all kinds of hijinks ensue, and the whole Justice League has to get together to save the planet and try to figure out what's going on with the second moon. Good story. Great art.
Just crazy storylines.
Insane. Super. And I didn't like them when I was younger. I was always like, they do these crazy storylines, but now I think they're best.
Well, and it's funny because I think that was a big distinction between DC and Marvel. DC always had the really out there storylines with the JLA and with the different, but Marvel really brought it down to kind of grittiness for the street level type stuff. We know, like I said, Daredevil or Spider-Man. Yes, they got into the space stuff with Guardians later on, and Silver Surfer and Fantastic Four was always a space-based type of thing. But it really was. They really had a grittiness to their totally different tone compared to the rest of it.
Absolutely. Keith Knight, I'm sure he had the Corgi toys as he.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he still does.
Remember? Oh yeah. Remember the Supermobile, and they did a couple different Batmobiles that were really good. Some from the 66 shows, some from the classic comic book era. And good stuff. Ian? No. Friends Don't Let Friends by Justice Joggers. That was the horrible, horrible days of Kenner when they were in the death throes of the superpowers. Nobody needs a Justice Jogger.
No.
But good stuff. I loved that era of the satellite years for the Justice League. They were a team. They did bicker, and there were some drama behind the scenes now and then. But for the most part, they were still super friends. On and on. So
I didn't read a lot of. Oh, go ahead.
Well, go ahead.
I was gonna say I didn't read a lot of DC stuff. So the whole, the storyline in the comics or in the TV comic show or the cartoon show where Batman and Wonder Woman kind of had a flirtatious thing. Was that ever in the comics? No,
not the Bronze Age.
Not in the Bronze Age.
Yeah. Okay.
But in the Grant Morrison era, with the JLA, it was kind of hinted at that Diana and Bruce
had
feelings.
Sure. Yeah, I really want to go back and start reading some of these now.
Yeah, I liked the Grant Morrison era. It was different. It was definitely not your classic JLA, and he went into, if you like cosmic, he definitely went into some cosmic storylines.
Okay.
He liked dealing with the idea of, the mythology of the pantheon, seeing them as like, the 7 Greek gods or Roman gods.
Okay. Wow.
And that was kind of the core of his Justice League. And then they would go on cosmic adventures, of course.
Nice.
Yeah.
But back in these days, things were a little bit more simple. It was just the spandex and cape crowd hanging out and saving the world every few minutes. And eating Hostess fruit pies. They did a lot of Hostess fruit pies.
And at this point in the Bronze Age, that was the Superman that could pretty much do anything.
Really?
Yes.
So yeah, he was
This is
completely
pre-crisis.
overpowered. Yeah, so they had to come up with some really crazy stories in order to challenge the entire team, or else Superman could just do everything by himself.
That makes sense.
Yeah. One of my favorite nemesis. Is it Nemesis?
Nemesis? I don't know.
Nemesis. This guy.
Oh, God.
Mixus Pitalik.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you want to thwart Superman, bring magic to the table.
That's true.
And he could always just, and he wasn't trying to be, mean. Well, maybe a little bit, but he was just having fun.
It's who he was. Who he was.
favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just, I love the stories where, you've got the big blue Boy Scout suddenly being jerked around by this little imp.
Right.
Those are just fun, Kind of pulls on Superman's cape, which Jim Croce told us you shouldn't do.
You should not do that.
That's right. Cap's back! Another great one from back in the day. I, again, picked this up in the spinner rack because I saw that cover, and it's like Red Skull and the Falcon and Cap. Oh, yeah!
That artwork. Look at that artwork. Just...
Yeah, it's great stuff. This artwork was so good, as a matter of fact, it ended up on a Slurpee cup. And I had that Slurpee cup as a kid. In 1977, when they were doing the Slurpee cups with the Marvel Comics, this cover was one of them. And this was a tough story. This was the first time Steve Rogers had been back in his Star-Spangled outfit after being Nomad. He had gotten disillusioned with the United States government because he had heard about some shenanigans going on in the background and decided to give up the shield and not be a super soldier anymore. And so someone else had taken over the role, and unfortunately, when the Skull found that out, he dispatched him in a very horrific way for Marvel Comics in the day. So guilt over having someone else die, posing as Captain America, Cap decides to give up Nomad, puts the suit back on, and he and Falcon go out and smash the Skull's head really, really hard. So good story. Peggy Carter shows up in this, the real Peggy Carter, not the MCU version, and all kinds of good stuff going on here. So good stories.
Intriguing story. I never knew about this. Once again, I see the synopsis, hear you talking about it, and I want to know more. I'm drawn in.
Yeah, the whole
worth a read. And this was also pivotal in the fact that, for a lot of people, they didn't enjoy the idea of Captain America because there was a lot of anti-American sentiment because of the Vietnam War and some other conflicts. And they reflected that in the Steve Rogers character. That was why he became Nomad.
Yep.
And when he comes back to the suit, he's like, I'm not going to be a super soldier anymore. I will be the sentinel of liberty. I am now the embodiment of what America should be. Kind of like DC's Uncle Sam, the spirit of America. And that was kind of a cooler approach.
And Marvel was always better at reflecting the times than DC was as far as the storylines and stuff that were going on. And they still are to some degree.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And back over to Batsy. Another great comic book cover, Detective Comics 566, Know Your Foes. So we get to see the Rogues Gallery and, kind of go through a trip through memory lane where Bruce is explaining to the new Robin, Jason Todd, some of the villains that he's had to come up against. And it's a good story. A lot of it is not so much reprint, but it just kind of retreads and covers. It's kind of an in-between weird space because the crisis had just occurred, the real first Infinite Crisis on Infinite Earths, the one that kind of set everything in motion. And the Prime Earth hadn't quite settled into its timeline yet. So you still have the early days of Jason Todd as Robin, wearing the original Robin suit. You've still got the classic Batman Rogues Gallery. They get a lot darker when you get around issue 401, because that's when they start over with more of the Dark Knight idea and Frank Miller's interpretation of his first year one.
Had it come out then at this time?
Very quickly after this. This was, I think, the same year. So they were just tying up loose ends with the previous DC pre-crisis and getting ready to go into the post-crisis era. So it was just kind of a great in-between homage to what had come before.
So Dark Knight and Crisis came out kind of close to each other then, didn't they?
They did. I'm not sure which one came first, to be honest.
See, I wasn't a DC guy, so I don't really know much of those stories. Those are really
well. The Dark Knight Returns was an Elseworld story, and I think that came out first.
Oh, was it really an Elseworld one? Because I love the Elseworld stuff. I didn't realize that was Elseworld.
Mm-hmm. And I think it was from that he springboarded and went back and did year one in continuity.
Okay.
And then, so the year one Batman is the Batman from Batman Dark Knight Returns.
Okay.
So there's tie-ins there that Miller brought in. Yeah.
Okay.
Great story, and of course the basis of many of the motion picture versions. They all reach back to Frank Miller for reference, and rightly so. His year one was very good. This is from what came before, the last breaths of the Bronze Age, I would say. Koji, did you have this one? Were you reading Batman at this time?
I didn't have this particular issue. I was picking up Detective sporadically at that time,
Right.
so I didn't have this. I do have a T-shirt with that image on it, though.
Yeah, cool. I love the cover. I love the story. I want to read it, and just great.
And you know what Jeff pointed at with Marvel, they kind of tried to do it DC with Green Arrow. And the backup story here, Green Arrow is very much a street level hero. He deals with street level crime. He and Black Canary. Yeah, so a lot of those back issue stories, Green Arrow he couldn't hold his own solo comic. They gave him a try a couple times, but there just wasn't enough of a subscriber base. So he usually ended up in the back of either Batman or Flash. I think he showed up a couple times.
Or a 4-issue series or something.
Right, but good storytelling. And again, he was very much a street level hero at this point, and those hard traveling hero era stories were really good. Especially that was one time where you had a great story arc within a larger story. Because they took Green Lantern on a left turn and brought him back to Earth and hooked him up with Oliver Queen and Dinah and said, "Go see America, re-explore your roots." And that was Neil Adams. I can't remember who else worked on that with him, but fantastic storyline. And the Green Arrow in this is very reminiscent of that era.
I think Green Arrow got a little more popular after Mike Grell did the Longbow Hunters. Did you read that one?
Yes.
That kind of stripped down the Silver Age and the Bronze Age Green Arrow, took away the boxing glove arrows and the silly stuff like that, and gave him the regular arrows again. Yeah,
they even address that in the comic, where he's looking at all those old gimmicky arrows and saying, "You know what? Screw this. I'm a bowman. I'll go back to just pointy arrows."
And that's when he changed from the Robin Hood-like costume to the hood we know him for now. So
yeah, and they based him in a real city. They put him in Seattle.
Right.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's I think I've ever. Yeah, I really got to get into old DC. I was always a Marvel guy, and I've missed out.
Yeah.
And that was one of the post-crisis stories that was really well done. Like you said, Mike Grell, great storyteller, and he just stripped down the character to his basics, put him in a different situation. His relationship with Black Canary was kind of on the rocks. That was when he brought in some of the more Oriental backstory elements.
Yep.
You find out that he has a history with a lady assassin.
Shadow.
Shadow, yeah. And it's good stuff.
Oh, is that the SHADO version
Yes.
of Shadow? Yeah, okay. I do have that actually someplace around here. But yeah, it kind of reminds me of some of the stuff they were doing with Wolverine and the Asian influences and Daredevil. And yeah, everyone was kind of kind of going Asian with the influence on some of those street level characters, because that was where the training was at.
Yeah, and yeah, definitely tied in with some of the ninja craze that was kind of on the ebb, or the kind of ebbing out at that point. But they tied that in, and it reminded me a little bit of that one of the storylines Wilhelm brought up that Wolverine gets into. And let's see what Will's rack memories are. I wanted to say Will tonight.
So here we go. This is this wasn't from a spinner rack, so forgive me for this one, but it is the first comic I remember owning. And it's an old comic. So back when I was a kid, they used to, like, during the summer, they would have like flea markets in the school, or even during like winter break, like when we were on, like, in the halls of the school. So it was weird because you were going to your school, but like people had tables set up. And I remember seeing this comic, and my older brother, and I know I bring him up all the time, but I had the best big brother you could have because he bought this for me. And this cover alone, and this is also like a bad story in the sense that I didn't take care of this comic, and I let it get destroyed, and I laid it on the floor, but I would read it over and over again.
Were you one of those kids that would roll up your comic book and stick it in your back pocket? I hated that.
Yeah, at first, yeah. I didn't know anything about collecting or keeping, or, I would carry this thing around with me. But as a kid, I'd leave it on the couch. Someone else would sit on it. I would, I dragged this comic around with me. I don't have it anymore, but I remember, and I was even looking for images of the inside of the comic, but the paper it was made on. This comic's from late 60s, I believe. And the colors were so rich in it that, like, it just, like, mesmerized me as a kid. Like, I just kept reading it over and over again. If you click, like, to the next slide, the story, I just remember Cap breaking out of, like, the Hulk had him, and he, like, does this kick, and he breaks out and flips out. And, after reading this synopsis, in current day, because I haven't read this since I was 6 or 7 years old. But yeah, just hell breaks loose because Hulk is just smashing up New York City, and Cap has to jump in and save him. I didn't realize Rick Jones becomes the next Bucky. Yep. And this was the first appearance of Madam Hydra. I just remember that cover, the colors on the page, the ink they used, just like I said, just screaming to my child brain like, this is awesome. And my brother scolding me for just letting it go. He's like, I bought you this comic and it's all crumbled up and covers ripped and all this. And he kind of taught me after that how to care for my stuff. I thought
it was interesting. I didn't realize that Madam Hydra was loosely based on Madam Spectra from the Bond film.
I didn't know that either. Yeah,
I did not know that. But this is where it all started for me. This comic. Seeing it on a table at some crummy, flea market, my brother picking it up for me, and me reading it until it literally fell apart. I did look, and it's not too expensive, but, if you want to get it in good condition. But boy, would I ever just love to just, open it up and see if my memory of those pages, how the ink was on the pages, holds up. Was it that vibrant? Was it that rich? Because comics in the 80s, they were on that more like newspaper quality paper, and a little more faded, and sometimes the colors bled, and it wasn't quite as rich.
And then Spawn came out, and you're kind of like, what is this paper that Spawn is on?
Yeah, was that the Baxter paper that they used?
Yeah,
really vibrant. Ian Sweeney says, yes, those hazy salad days when you refer to Crisis, and you didn't have to ask which one. There was only one Crisis. Now there's a Crisis. Poor DC.
So, that Captain America comic is drawn by a gentleman named Jim Steranko, whose body of work in comics is very small, but very, very influential because he had a very unique visual style. So, that was
He worked on Doctor Strange as well, didn't he?
I'm not sure. He did a run on Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yep.
That's
okay.
Right. Was that the run Scorpio that was like Fury's crazy brother or something? That was fun. I remember
Well,
reading that.
I gotta thank him because he started my journey into comics. That comic, like I said, is great, and as you can see, it informs a lot of my decisions farther on because
Okay.
that, I guess the premise of the Hulk going nuts and a hero having to step up to fight the unbeatable foe happens a couple more times in my picks.
Cool. Mr. Wonderful, just wanted to touch base with the chat. He's hanging out with us. Pericles mentions that in the Bronze Age, he thought maybe Wonder Woman and Green Lantern were going to get together. I don't remember.
See that?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Poor Steve Trevor. He could never catch a break.
Yes. Batsy. Yes. Mark Hamill did a great Joker. That's
Amazing.
For sure.
He is Joker.
And the articulated Chad.
Hey, Chad, how are you?
Nice to see you. So, where were we, Will? We were just hulking out.
That's right.
And then from there, we get into some classic.
So here's just a fantastic kind of spinner rack story because I wasn't on the hunt for comics. I was just walking home from school. I go into the store. I see this on the rack, and I never heard of Ghost Rider before this.
Oh, love Ghost Rider.
But I happened to pick up the last issue. So just coming in on, and I read it, and I'm like, this looks so cool. I read it, it's the last issue. Now I'm on a mission to find all the other issues.
Johnny
I
Blake.
never completed the series, obviously, but anytime I went to flea market, anywhere with comics, I would look for back issues of Ghost Rider.
I still do the same thing.
And pick them up.
Yep.
And for years, this became a thing. And it all started with the end of Ghost Rider. I started the story at the end and worked backwards for decades. I still, to this day, if I were to look through a box and find an old issue of Ghost Rider, I'd probably pick it up.
Yeah.
So this was one of those just pure spinner rack moments where I just saw something, it clicked, and it sent me on this adventure. I kind of retold the story.
And, for most of us, our Ghost Rider was Johnny Blaze. There was no other Ghost Rider.
Right.
Now there's like 6 different flavors, including Frank Castle is
Frank Castle is Cosmic Ghost Rider. Yeah. In fact, I think I showed you guys this earlier. Yeah. The what did I do with that? Yeah. In the Thanos book, there is Cosmic Ghost Rider, a future version of Frank Castle as the Punisher, becomes the Ghost Rider.
Okay, and who remembers, because Ghost Rider made an appearance in a Marvel Limited series called Team America. Do you remember this one? That was also, because Ghost Rider was in it, it was like a 10-part miniseries. I never got the last issue, and every comic shop I ever went to didn't have it, where they revealed the identity of the Marauder, which was this mysterious figure that would... but if you guys ever check it out, it's only 10 issues, real easy. They made toys of those, actually. There was a motorcycle.
wow.
It was kind of like the
it's
Evel
kind of
Knievel motorcycle.
Yeah.
But they made one for Team America. And my brother or someone told me that they made a Ghost Rider version of it. And I wanted that so bad. I don't think it actually exists. I think someone was just lying to me. But in my head, it existed. So every time I went to a store or went somewhere, I looked and I'd be, maybe they have it, because I had the Team America one, and one of the coolest things was the figure kind of sucked. He just was only in motorcycle position, but you could remove his helmet, and that was one of the first times you could do that. Anyway, that
seems like it should have been a no-brainer, because the Evel Knievel cycle that Ideal did was so popular.
Yeah.
Why not make a Ghost Rider version of that? That just seems perfect.
This is a top 3 character for me as Ghost Rider of any form, and even the newer ones are really well done, where he's driving the car. Those comics are really well done. I got into this one on the series after this, where he was on the new bike and stuff. But yeah, I love Ghost Rider.
Yeah, this took Johnny on kind of an interesting arc where he still had some mystical powers as Johnny Blaze.
Right.
And then Ghost Rider, the demon, was it
Zarathos? Yeah.
Zarathos, yeah.
He picked up a new host.
Yep.
He was kind of on his own for a while. Some weird stuff, shenanigans went on. and then kind of tied into the Night Stalkers and
Yep.
the
Midnight Suns.
Midnight Suns.
Midnight Sun stuff is really cool.
Yeah, great stuff.
Johnny Blaze had the Hellfire shotgun.
Yeah, the Hellfire shotgun. Just
he had kind of that 80s, biker chic kind of look for a while. Did he have a mullet?
Son of Satan stuff kind of tied into that too.
Yep.
Son of Satan, yeah.
Those were fun, and yet they could be right next door, having a chili dog with, the Heroes for Hire, Luke Cage and those guys. They'd rub elbows.
Well, and then Ghost Rider in the TV series, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where Ghost Rider was in like the fourth season of that. Actually, pretty well done. It's interesting
and that
though.
What was his name? Reyes. The newer
Robbie Reyes.
Robbie Reyes.
Yeah. But it's interesting that whole subgenre, and they're delving into that stuff now with the TV shows with Scarlet Witch and everything too, and the whole, the mythology of, Mephisto is kind of the linchpin for a lot of that stuff, and as the main devil, he is the devil. But it's interesting that this was, devil worshiping was such a weird craze thing back in the 70s and 80s, and yet Marvel had a whole bunch of comics that delved into that. It's just interesting that they did that.
Yeah, I mean, you had the whole satanic panic of the 80s, and somehow Marvel slid under the radar.
Yep, satanic panic in the 80s with D&D and all, supposed cults all over the place, and yeah, it's just crazy stuff.
Definitely. But this was one, like I said, definitely reminded me of some of the better street level stuff, and taking a character, stripping him down, putting him on his own story arc.
Patch.
This was spinner rack memory all day long, because I was at lunch and my friend goes, "You know who Patch is?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know who he is." And he's like describing Wolverine basically, and I'm like, "That's Wolverine." He's like, "No, his name's Patch. He's a new guy." Blah, blah, blah. I just got it over at the store. Blah, blah. I ran to the store after school, and there were still 2 copies left on the shelf. Nice. So I picked it up and I read it. Just look at that cover. Yeah. Just fantastic. And this is another sad comic story, because one time in the 90s, I thought it was a really good idea to take all of my best and favorite comics, put them in one short box, kind of consolidate them, because they were mixed, and I still have probably 6 or 7 long boxes that, I had from when I was a kid. But anyway, just long story short, that one short box was easy to lose, and somewhere in a move, I think I gave it to a friend to hold for me until, whatever, I could get into a place, and it's all gone. This was one of the issues that was in there, and probably a bunch of the other ones. But yeah, it's all gone. I lost them all. But I consolidated everything I had, all my favorites, and then lost it. And it's a long story, but yeah. But great story. Oh, I just loved it. This was
This was.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say this wasn't this was a new turn for Wolverine. This was not, we go to Madripoor. We see Wolverine, going up against this cult of the Black Blade, seeking to collect the Muramasa blade, powerful sword. This is kind of where you get that samurai backstory. It was new, it was different, and I loved it. I
loved this
collected
too.
This series from issue 1, probably until about 100 consistently. Like, every month I looked. If I couldn't find it that month, or I missed a month, I would go find it at a comic shop and buy the back issue. So
this was chock full of first appearances. The first appearance of the Cult of the Black Blade, the first mention of the Murasawa, the blade itself, which became an integral part of Wolverine's backstory. You find out about his, you kind of knew he had an Asian lover at this point, but you really hadn't delved into that storyline as much. I think the entire X-Men at this point were considered dead or missing, and Wolverine was undercover, and that's why he took on the Patch identity, part of it. Madripoor
was launched on the 4-issue series. The Wolverine Limited series came out first, and then That's where Co first came in, and then this kind of took off from that. But this was right at the height of Wolverine's like first wave of popularity, and it really kicked off even more so. And this, I think I was the same way. I collected all those 1 through 50. I think is what I ended up with, but some past it. But it's a great story.
Now, was Larry Hama writing it at this time?
He did parts of it, I think.
Yeah, he did. But yeah, just fantastic. And like I said, great memory for me, just because, like I said, there was some kids telling lies in lunch class. I'm going to go find out for myself. And I ran to the store and I got it. And it's one of the first, like I said, series, just like the opposite of Ghost Rider. I got in at the beginning on this one and kept reading and didn't have to backtrack. So that's why I chose it.
And then we get into one of my favorite subgenres, the crossovers.
Oh yeah, a few of those.
Not so much a spinner rack story for me, but the base shelf of a liquor store newsstand called Lazzaro's in Tenafly, New Jersey, where my dad would frequent. And he always bullshitted with the guy at the counter. I don't know why we went there, but he would go there, and sometimes he'd wind up talking to this dude for 20, 30 minutes. And I would just sit there and I was safe to flip through comics. This one, so he had the magazine rack on the wall where, it was like a thinner rack, but it went all the way up the wall, and he had all the magazines on there. And on the base shelf, there was just like planks of wood on cinder blocks, and they would stack up all the newspapers every day. On the bottom of that shelf, so we would go, late at night, there were these comics. So this is a large size, magazine size comic.
Was this what they called the Treasury editions, or is that something different? Aha.
Yeah. There it is. Yep. And it had that cover price of $2.50, which is far more than a comic cost back then. I think they were 60 cents or 75 cents maybe when this was published.
But it was chock full of good stuff.
So I had flipped through it and just looked at some of the pictures of it. Anyway, I always just remembered it was a weird thing. I didn't know DC and Marvel at the time when is this? This is from the 70s 77 or something? Yeah. Early 80s, right?
81.
Oh, 81.
Oh, it's 81. Okay. So yeah, I was probably 7 or 8 years old when I first saw this. Anyway, when I was 12 or 13, and I had a bike and I had some money, and the thought came to my head. I was talking to a friend about it. I was like, you know what? He had all kinds of old comics and magazines. He was like one of those mom and pop places. He didn't rip the cover off and send it back for credit. They just sat there, old back issues, new old stock just hanging out there. So one day I mustered up the courage, even though this is like 2 miles away from my house, but it was a different town, and it was, over here, and rode my bike there, and lo and behold, there was 2 copies of it. One with a ripped cover, and this one, or should I say this one, this copy of the comic that I picked up probably in 1988 or 89. So, almost 10 years after it was published, and I bought it for cover price. And I was so excited because I had to lift all the magazines off the base shelf, and I was digging for it because I had remembered it was there years earlier, and it was still there. I had it framed, and it was just a frame I bought, but I had this hanging in my office. Yeah, it's not in the best condition, but it's mine. And I went on that journey to find it, and what a wacky story! Just crazy. When you look at, you're like, Batman versus Hulk. No way, that's not gonna happen. That's Batman will just get squished like a bug, but he uses a gas bomb and then does like this jackknife kick into Hulk's solar plexus and makes him exhale and breathe the gas in, which is very strategic. So it's kind of there, you could see how then they team up because he reverts back to Banner. Batman speaks reason to him. We have the Shaper of Worlds gives the Joker unlimited cosmic power, and it just goes nuts towards the second half of the comic. It's just a crazy story. The paper's really nice. The ink looks great. The artwork's fantastic. I absolutely love it. It's one of my treasures that I didn't lose, and I've managed to keep, for all these years, and just so out there that, it was one of those things, like, as a kid, I would go, did I, like, dream that? Or did I actually see that comic? It was like one of those moments where I had to find out. There was no internet, so I would tell my friends, like, one time I was at my dad and I saw Batman fight the Hulk, and they were like, bullshit, you're lying. You're just making stuff up. So, I got on my bike that day and rode over there, and I was like, I know it exists. So, yeah, just a wonderful adventure for me. A, kind of personal triumph, and just an everlasting memory. I'll never forget this issue. Or that.
Sadly, I don't have any of the crossovers in my collection anymore, but I really love these. My first introduction was the Superman Spider-Man, and I think that might have been the first crossover that they did.
Yeah.
Because it was one of those things where Marvel and DC, a lot of the guys knew each other. They were drinking buddies. They both publishing houses, had kind of a rivalry going, but they understood that people read both of their stuff, and everybody wanted to see crossovers. So they created what later became known as Earth 7642, which in that continuity, Marvel and DC are all in the same universe. So they used Earth 7642 to bring in the Transformers, Witchblade, Wildcats, She. So a lot of other crossovers came from this. And I put together a list for those who are curious. So in this world, it is both canonically in the Crisis of Infinite Earths, it's mentioned, and it's mentioned in the Marvel Universe. So it exists in both universes.
Yeah, I've got the second one there. That's actually a pretty good story.
Yeah, the first one, the Spidey versus Soups, I think the second one was better. Where in the second one they had Dr. Doom and was it Lex Luthor that teamed up? I always get those two confused. But good storylines.
Yeah.
And then of course you've got Batman, Hulk, and then you've got my personal favorite was the Teen Titans and the Uncanny X-Men.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
Fantastic story. Great art, great storytelling, and it was one of those crossovers that just fit because both of the teams were kind of teenager-ish age, and just really well done. Of course, Batman, Daredevil, Punisher, Batman, a lot of good ones. Spider-Man and Batman was a fun one. Darkseid versus Galactus.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so many I didn't know about.
Me too. I didn't know about that one.
I think that one, Silver Surfer, gets tied into that as well.
That'd be cool.
Daredevil, Batman's a good team up.
Now, did you read that one, the Batman Daredevil?
Yes.
Oh, you did? Does Batman ever mention hey, Daredevil, you're kind of more like a Batman than me with your sonar?
I don't think he ever blatantly on the nose puts that out.
I just wonder if they ever mentioned that because I was always like, Daredevil is pretty much technically Batman, but
kind of, sort of.
So it's funny how people are into the movies that think that the multiverse thing is such a new thing, but you look at the multiverse concept's been around since the 70s, if not even. I can't even remember where it first came out. It was DC though that came out with it first, though, right?
DC, when they were trying to figure out where to put the Golden Age heroes, they created what became Earth 2. It should have been Earth 1 because they came first, but they were Earth 2 for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then you had the two Flashes that met, the Silver Age and the Golden Age. That kind of sparked off the Justice Society and the Justice League would do crossovers once a year.
Yeah.
Marvel, I'm not sure when Marvel started doing
the
multiverse stuff, but they definitely had a lot of stories that span that. And now in the modern Marvel continuity, there's
everywhere.
There are all kinds of different universes that open and collapse. And
it's the concept sheet that can tie any storyline together and bring anybody back.
The ultimate MacGuffin.
Yep.
It used to be the Cosmic Cube. Now it's the multiverse.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. The Cosmic Cube was always the huge thing that we all thought the Tesseract of the movies was going to be the Cosmic Cube, and it turned out that was nowhere to be found.
Yeah. Oh, Pericles, thank you for reminding me. It was Dr. Doom and Parasite in that.
Parasite, yeah. So here we go.
Plastic Hulk again.
Yep.
I know it's I'm a sucker for these Hulk fights, but this got me into the Mighty Thor. It was one of the ones that also sent me down this path. But I saw this cover, and I said, be thou God or monster. 1987. I picked this up just on a whim on the newsstand, and having destroyed half a forest just west of the Mississippi River, Hulk sleeps. In New York, Thor is told of Hulk's rampage and flies to stop him. During their battle, Thor is clearly an advantage against Hulk. I love this comic. I've read it so many times. Using Mjolnir, but suddenly the Green Goliath grabs a helpless woman, holds her hostage, demands Thor throws away his hammer, and they fight hand to hand. He says, puny god need hammer to fight Hulk, So Thor throws it as far as he can, and they start going at it, toe to toe. They level this entire small town that they're in, and Thor's kind of getting his ass kicked. He's starting to, without his hammer, he's getting beat up. He's bruised. He's bleeding. He's bloodied. He's fighting back, and finally, the hammer returns to him, and Hulk's just like, I beat you. He just jumps away, and it kind of ends on, ceremoniously. But in the aftermath, Thor realizes what an asshole he was, because he leveled this town basically just on this kind of just pissing
Hulk
contest.
has to be
Hulk.
strongest there is, period. That's his ego.
But Thor looks around at the damage he caused, blinded by the battle, and realizes that God became a monster. He should have not cared about, going toe to toe with the Hulk and cared about that. It was one of the first times you realized that, Thor is a god, but he is not invincible. He gets his butt kicked.
How many times did they fought before this?
A couple. I'm sure there's been several times, but this also, there's that. I think it's an issue of Hulk, the one with the claws, and you see the Hulk's reflection in Wolverine's claws. It's Grey Hulk versus Wolverine in the Arctic.
I think Wolverine's first appearance was in a Hulk comic.
It was, yeah, Hulk 181 or 182, but that one, of course, I bought that on the newsstand because I saw that cover and I just went, hell yeah, I'm watching this one. And I mean, Wolverine punches a hole right through the Hulk in that one, and the Hulk heals. It's the first time I've kind of realized Hulk has that healing factor. There was Hulk versus Thing. They duke it out in New York City in around the same time, I guess. But anyway, this really made me a fan of Thor, and I went back from this point and bought a bunch of back issues, and then also picked up a lot of future issues as well.
This is a really good time period for Thor stories.
Yeah,
in this area right here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was this the Walt Simonson era, or was this before that?
I'm not sure.
I think that was after it.
Yeah.
So I just that logo always just sets me off. Like, those are good Thor stories. If I see a logo like that, I'm trying to get a complete run of that whole time period.
So I still have
both of these characters. They went through some great storylines.
Yeah.
You had all the different. You had Grey Hulk. You had Mr. Fix-It. You had Smart Hulk.
Yep.
But the rampaging Hulk was always my favorite because it's like, he's not a hero. He's not a villain.
Yeah.
He's just a pissed off green Goliath. He just wants to be left alone, and the army keeps, bugging him.
Why puny human always bother Hulk?
And then for Thor, you had the whole Beta Ray Bill thing, and then what was it? Thunderstrike took over the role.
I mean, I still liked it. I still read those, but but yeah, Hulk is strongest.
That's right. Hulk strongest there is. Period.
Yep.
That is it.
Now, while I had a bunch of comic book nerds here, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. This is something that I can't get my head around. Marvel in recent years has created what they call a sliding timescale for the 616.
Okay.
So the way they're working it now, and I don't know exactly when this started, but basically they're saying that all of the key points of Marvel history happen within a certain time period of about 12 years, give or take. So as continuity keeps moving forward, in order to keep the characters young, basically, the the events in the 616 will just kind of slide forward in time to match where they should be. So the Fantastic Four's first flight into space, you know, in like, let's see, okay, it goes back to the 1980s according to this. It's like John Byrne is.
Yeah, a set period of 7 years. Yeah,
7 years. So basically, roughly, there's like a 13 period time period. So whatever the first Fantastic Four space flight was, so like in 2008, it happened in 95. In 2018, it would have happened in 2005, and it keeps sliding forward to keep the characters relevant, so that there's this timeline. Why?
So you can have the same character be, you know, appealing to someone that appeal to their older brother, or, you know, their dad or something. You know, look at, take Tony Stark as an instance. When it was first appearance of Iron Man? 64? Something like that. And Tony Stark's been around since then and still the same age.
Yeah.
So I mean, DC's answer to this is to keep doing crises and reboots.
Yeah, rebirth.
You know, mileage will vary on that. Some of them have been worse than others. But one thing I liked about the Golden Age characters being part of the Silver Age in Earth 2 was you got to see them grow old. You got to see legacy characters come up, sons and daughters. Did we ever get that with Marvel? Or is that in one of the alternate universes?
You're starting to more and more now a little bit, because they're starting to hand off to their, you know, kids they brought in. You know, you got Ironheart taking place of Iron Man. You know, you got X-23 taking the place of Wolverine.
You got Falcon Cap.
Yep. Yeah. So you definitely have that to some degree. You know, you still have that sliding timeline scale that's a little liquid, and you're like, what timeline is this? I just don't think about it.
Yeah, they've done those alternate universe stories before. What was it, the like MC2 or something like that, where they had Spider Girl, Peter and Mary Jane's daughter grew up, and there was future versions of the Avengers, things like that. The problem with the sliding time scale is a lot of the origins become dated. So what do you do with them?
Right.
Like, is the Hulk still created by an atomic bomb test or a gamma bomb test back in the 60s? It runs into all sort of problems.
Or did they, you know, like in G.I. Joe, you know, they all were Vietnam vets that came back, or would they be Afghanistan vets now, or Iraq War vets now? You know, it's so you know, it's I wouldn't want to have to think through that.
That is a tough thing when you're dealing with, you know, these stories that last for, you know, multiple decades, but the events are only supposed to take place within a few weeks or years. It's like, how do you?
And we know, you know, not everything is as original as we think it is, but it seems like originality died in the 60s or 70s, and we've just been kind of rehashing everything since then.
There's an argument for
we
that.
do know that, you know, when we look back at some of like the pulp heroes and the, you know, those ones that are in public domain, there were a lot. I mean, they just threw everything they could at the wall during the 30s and 40s, and certain things stuck and certain things didn't. And you could find kind of very familiar characters that were brought back and kind
That's
of.
That's a perfect point right there. Pericles is a perfect point.
But do you set them in different time periods, though? You know, is it because people aren't interested in that? I mean, I would read something that takes place in the 60s and move forward from, you know.
You know, like what they did with the X-Men First Class film. I think that was a good idea.
Yeah.
Put them in the time period where they make sense. So the 1960s, early 70s works for a lot of these comic book characters. Why not just make it a period? It makes more sense. Or Fantastic Four should be in the 1960s, in my opinion.
Well, even look at the movies now. I mean, that first Iron Man came out, 2008? Mm-hmm. That's a long time ago, you know, in those movies period, you know.
How about maybe someone comes up with something new now, and we move forward from there?
How dare you, Will? How dare you?
I was saying Action Force, you know, Valverse stuff, yeah.
Exactly.
Never get that job at Disney.
No, they don't like creative people at Disney anymore, unfortunately. Well, gentlemen, we have had a double feature. We have doubled our time for our normal lounge session, and we've had a good time. I'm going to call it because my stomach is grumbling and I want some dinner.
Me too.
But it's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun. Jeff, we'd love to have you back in the lounge again.
Would love to
whether
be
we
back,
talk
you guys. Thank
comics
you.
Or toys or whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yep,
We'll
thank you so
pick a
much.
topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Will, always nice to have you hanging around. Carl,
Of course.
love you,
Just
man.
one
For your
closing thing. Just want to say, I'm glad we all didn't come up with the same comics, and it was completely random. We all came up with different things, but great picks, guys. Every single one of your picks made me want to go and explore those stories.
Me too. Those
Thank
DC
you for
ones.
that. You guys are the best. It has really reawakened that sense of wonder and curiosity in me, and I thank you for that.
That's
Yeah,
right.
you guys,
Kids,
thank you so much.
go find a spinner rack near you. Pick up a comic. You won't regret it. Everybody have a good night.
Good night.
See you guys.